This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast is brought to you in partnership with Tesco.
We know that healthy soil is the key to so many of the environmental objectives that we're being asked to deliver as farmers today. And at the core of that, on many soil types, I think we believe is effective field drainage. So we're really, for the first time, trying to get good data on what are the environmental benefits as well as the production benefits of putting in a modern field drainage system.
As the wet winter leaves land underwater, a special drainage project benefits farmers and soil health. How a closer relationship with the EU could be good for growers and livestock producers if we can get the balance right. Louise and Hugh get out and about on farms in Wales and Leicestershire, and we discover how team spirit can improve our mental well-being during Mind Your Head Week. Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
All that and more coming up, but as always, straight to our top story. Plans for a closer relationship with Europe could benefit farmers, but only if they're properly implemented. That's according to MPs on the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee, who've been examining the idea of dynamic alignment with EU rules on plant and animal products, a so-called sanitary and phytosanitary agreement. Success would reduce trade friction, but poor implementation could also mean more costly regulations. For a committee chairman, Alistair Carmichael.
I think it should not be beyond the wit of man. But I do have serious concerns about the way in which the government is going about this, because look, there is a real prize for us here in terms of access to markets, and we're all about growth, we're all about increasing profitability these days, and in having that freer, easier trading relationship is something that's got to be good if we can achieve it. But the danger is that we end up signing up for all sorts of things that will not be understood by those who are negotiating the agreement. This is the point to be sounding the alarm and to be saying to the government, as you negotiate this, do not negotiate away things that you do not understand, that the people who understand the real life consequences of what you're talking about are the farmers up and down the country. Respect their knowledge and respect what they do. And actually, there's no reason why you can't get a good, workable deal out of this at the end of the day.
Farmers and other people working in agriculture, Alistair, will probably understand the pros and the cons of dynamic alignment better than the negotiators who are trying to thrash out this deal themselves. So how, as an industry, do we get that message across, that need to get it right?
Well, I mean, you're right. There being I've spoken about the need for government to respect farmers. I think farmers have to have a measure of confidence in the way in which the government does its business. But the people who can achieve that most easily are the government by reaching out. They are the people who are in control here.
And moving on to a potential agreement, if there is a deal, possibly as early as next year, what sort of implementation period do you think would be needed for farming to adjust to the new way of working, to avoid a cliff edge?
Well, the view the committee took was that we need a period up to about 24 months. I think certainly the longer the implementation period, then the smoother the implementation will be. The worst possible thing here would be a cliff edge, where you just say, right, day one, here we go. Now, my worry is that Keir Starmer, having other problems within government at the moment, is looking for a quick and easy win that's going to do a bit to restore his own standing. So getting this implementation period down to the minimum, getting it done as quickly as possible, could be seriously bad news. And if you don't allow time for that realignment, then the cost to farmers at the end of the day will be horrendous.
That's EFRA Committee Chairman Alistair Carmichael. Hugh, dynamic alignment, big benefits if we get it right, but a big downside if it all goes wrong.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, there's obviously issues around. I mean, the main one, I suppose, the hanging one, which I'm sure Louise will touch on in a minute, is around plant protection products, and some that are licensed in the UK and some that are not licensed in Europe. And what do you do if you want to send a load of barley or wheat that's been grown with them? So there's some sorting out to do there. In terms of easing friction at the border, we've said before, it's a big benefit. So specifically, if we think about lamb, it's our biggest, it's one of our biggest agricultural exports. Over half the sheep meat we produce in the UK, we export, and pretty much all of that goes into Europe. And at the moment, whilst it's running and it's ticking over, we had that little bit of drama, you'll remember, before Christmas, where some French inspectors started finding bits of wool on lamb carcasses, which apparently they hadn't seen before. But anyway, were they highlighting how important they are being on the border, worried that this disagreement would do away with their job? Or was it just causing some drama? Who knows? But yes, having a seamless border like we used to, if you were someone that was exporting lambs to, for example, or any foodstuffs, hugely, hugely beneficial. And, I've said it before, when I went around a lamb factory the other year, the owner of the factory said, he dreaded the 3:00 in the morning phone call from French customs to tell him that they were condemning the load of lambs, or they were impounding or suspending them because they found a bit of wool on, or there was a comma in the wrong place on the health cert. So it will benefit, I think. And I think you can see why the governments, if you take the politics out of it and just look at our economic flows and also discount whether you love or hate Europe or how you voted in 2016, you look at the amount of decrease in trade that's happened with Europe, and it's pretty large, and we know that. The figures are out there. The friction at the border has caused all sorts of problems. It's added cost for people that have carried on. There will be people that have stopped doing it because it's just too much hassle and they couldn't be bothered. So that's going on. And actually, from a government, if the government's trying to kick on growth, this is quite a cheap way of doing it, because, yes, you've got to sit in a load of rooms and buy everyone teas and coffees and arrange the meeting space in Brussels and London, etc. But actually, in terms of what it will deliver to the economy, or potentially deliver, it's probably worthwhile doing. And also, if you think about the political cycle at the moment, where we are, 3.5 odd years off the election, this is a no-brainer thing for Labour. Now, look, despite all Labour's psychodramas and whether Larry the cat will be leading the Labour Party by the time we actually get to the election, the reality is, if they can position themselves and saying, look, this European alignment works, it's increased our growth, why would you want to turn your back on Europe? That's a hugely juxtaposition sort of proposition at election compared to the other parties who don't like Europe. So you can see why they're going down that route.
And Louise, as Hugh's alluded to, some big implications for arable growers.
Yeah, well, there are, potentially some big implications. And so there's still quite a lot of detail, I think, that the arable sector would like to be able to understand. And really, there are two areas that are worrying them, if you like, raising concerns. And that is gene editing, or the precision breeding bill, which has, we've passed that here, whereas that isn't the case in Europe. And the other thing is plant protection products. There are herbicides and fungicides, actually, that are approved for use here in the UK, which aren't approved for use in the EU. A bit of vice versa on that as well. So it's bringing all those things into line, really, and how they're going to do that. I think it's not just about new active ingredients or active ingredients that we've got and others haven't. It's also about ones that are coming up for renewal. So, for example, I was at a sugar beet event earlier this week, and there are 3 building blocks, if you like, of weed control programs in sugar beet. One of those is an active ingredient called fenmedifam. Well, that is coming up for renewal in the EU. There isn't really any alternative to that at the moment. So that'll be interesting to see products like that, whether we start to lose those, or whether, because of different weather conditions here in the UK, we're going to be allowed to keep products like that. So there's still a lot to be resolved. And I think there is also a particular worry around the use of pre-emergent sprays for blackgrass control. We know that flufenicet is going in the EU, and that's a real backbone of our blackgrass control programs here in the UK. And we also know that they don't or haven't yet approved synmethylin, which is another pre-emergence product and a very good one, which has been working well here. So all of a sudden, that whole area becomes much more murky if we don't have those products, and much more difficult for growers and their agronomists. So quite a few things, quite a few concerns being raised. The other big factor in the arable sector, of course, is the time scales involved. So when you have a crop in the ground and then a crop in store, if it is being treated with products which then get removed or revoked, what does that mean for the sales of the grain? So these are things that are being discussed concerning people, and we're going to need some clarity on those.
And Louise, you mentioned the weather. The weather here in the UK is different to the weather in Europe. We only have to look out the window at the moment to see that. We have a different climate, a maritime Atlantic climate, so we need different plant protection products to those in Europe. There's good reason for stuff being approved here that might not be at the moment approved in the EU. We need that wider choice.
Yeah, there is good reason. And actually, I found it quite reassuring that the EFRA committee did make that point on a few times in their report that, you know, as you say, there's good reason why we have some of these actives and the way that we use them as well. I think because what was the CRD when we were still in the EU was responsible for quite a lot of the agrochemical approvals and that whole approval process, we are probably quite far ahead of Europe on some of these things. So, you know, that also needs to be borne in mind, as well as the different growing conditions and the different weather that we have. The other thing I think which it may affect, or there may be differences, is in what we call MRLs, which are maximum residue levels, which do apply quite rightly to some agrochemicals. So there is quite a bit to sort out. And as you rightly say, that the weather is part of that whole discussion.
And Hugh, Alistair Carmichael's saying there does need to be an adequate transition or implementation period, possibly up to 24 months. This mustn't be something that is just introduced overnight. No cliff edge.
No, cliff edges, or if there is going to be an overnight thing, everyone needs to have their ducks in a row, but that's not impossible to do, as you can imagine, given the dynamic nature of the dynamic alignment, as it were. There's just loads of cogs going at once, isn't there? Look, the really key thing is that the right people are in the room when they're talking this through, because being an expert on trade deals is one thing, and that's really important to have that and have the legal expertise and the knowledge of those trade agreements and how that legislation is laid out. But flip side, it's equally really important to have someone in the room that knows what actives are, and if certain actives go missing in arable systems, for example, what will the impact be on UK cereal growers? To be fair to the Cabinet Office, with my NFU hat on, they have, you know, when they started on this journey, they were pretty eager to reach out to the various industry organisations. And because this is specifically around food, it's quite a small sectoral bit of bandwidth, as it were, even though it's a very important sector, food and farming. They have reached out to all the various people. Now, whether they've actually listened, who knows? Well, hopefully they have done. But there's lots of work being done by everybody in that sort of lobbying, representation, NGO type world on this subject. There's a lot of bandwidth, a lot of time being devoted to trying to get it right. And hopefully the government listens to the bits that they need to listen to and get the right things in and the right things out. And as you say, avoid that cliff edge at all costs, so everyone knows what the plan is.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And now we're joined by Natalie Smith from Tesco, this week's podcast partner and UK agriculture's biggest customer. We're talking about ways farming can become more profitable this week while harnessing the power of data. Natalie, why is data so important?
I think we all recognise the importance of the old saying around if you don't measure, then you can't manage. But we also recognise from a survey we've done with our farmers how much inconsistency there is in terms of collecting data and sharing of data. And that definitely is a key barrier to making farms more productive and sustainable in the long term. So, yeah, definitely continues to be an issue.
A lot of the issues around data are also about how it's used and particularly security.
Definitely. There's a lot of concern out there in terms of how data is going to be used, how it's valued. And we are really conscious of that as a retailer. We recognise that there's obviously desire for us to have consistency so that we're not duplicating and double handling data, but also that we're careful in terms of how that data is managed, that it's secure, that it's anonymous, and that ultimately the farmers are the owners of their data, not us or anyone else within the supply chain.
So, Natalie, how's Tesco helping farmers overcome this challenge?
So I guess in two ways. The first is how can we get that consistent measurement and baselining on farm. So going back to that point around measuring and management, we've got our new sustainable farming programme, which is where we're fully funding for our sustainable farming group farmers to have a data baselining, which is support of over 1.5 million. And that's across a number of our sustainable farming groups. But in addition to that, and I guess in response to some of those concerns around data security, ensuring that we're really clear in terms of ownership of that data. We only ever see aggregated information, and ultimately the purpose of that baselining is very much for farmers to be able to understand where they're at right now and where those opportunities are to continue to improve.
Lots going on then from Tesco. Natalie Smith from Tesco, this week's podcast partner and UK agriculture's biggest customer. Thank you very much.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Now, as a wet winter continues well into February, an innovative drainage scheme is delivering benefits for farmers and soil health in Leicestershire. With much of the country seeing twice the usual monthly rainfall, the drains are in full flow at the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust's Allerton project. It's all about thinking ahead and future-proofing farming, as Louise discovered when she saw the drainage scheme being installed last autumn.
My name is Joe Stanley. I'm Head of Sustainable Farming at the GWCT Allerton project.
So, Joe, this is a bit bizarre. We're in the hottest, driest season that many people can remember, and here we are installing drainage on one of the fields at the Allerton project. What's going on?
I think it's called future-proofing, Louise. Essentially, well, we know, don't we, the experience we've been having in recent winters and autumns and springs of huge amounts of rainfall coming down. I think farmers all understand that on many soil types and field situations, field drainage, well-functioning field drainage is an absolutely essential element of being able to get anything out of those fields at all. So what we're doing here at the Allerton project is working with industry partners. We've put together a coalition who are looking at essentially getting us modern British data on what are the benefits of modern future-proof field drainage for both production, so when we're talking about crop production, but also for the environment. We know that healthy soil is the key to so many of the environmental objectives that we're being asked to deliver as farmers today. And at the core of that, on many soil types, I think we believe is effective field drainage. So we're really, for the first time, trying to get good data on what are the environmental benefits as well as the production benefits of putting in a modern field drainage system.
Now, there are plenty of people who say that you don't need to do this, you don't need to interfere with the soil. If you just focus on your soil health, you'll get the infiltration rates that you need. If you take out the compaction, get the soil aggregation working well, then the job's done. What would you say to that?
I guess what I would say, especially on our heavy clay series soils here at the Allerton project, is good luck planting a cover crop in a waterlogged soil. And of course, all of those good regenerative farming practices, which are key to our farming operations here at the Allerton project, are an absolutely essential part of making that transition to a healthier soil. But at the core of that, at the base of that, has to be effective field drainage. And again, I just don't think you're going to get very far at all with all that cool regenerative stuff unless at the core of that you have got fundamentally free draining soils. And really, for me, it's making that case to government, and it's making that case to the supply chain. In both cases, in many cases within those different sort of supply chains, they don't even necessarily know that field drainage exists, is a thing, is something that we've relied on for literally centuries to enable us to produce food on much of our land. So this is really about raising the profile of this really crucial operation up onto that agenda so that we can start having intelligent conversations about how we go about replacing some of the aged and, frankly, by now dilapidated field drainage that we are now dealing with, in the UK.
This is a hugely expensive operation, and I think you are going to be comparing this field, half of it's being drained, half of it isn't being drained. What sort of measurements are you going to be taking?
That's right. So it's an arable field, heavy clay soils. As you say, we're redraining half, leaving half as is. And what we're going to be measuring is the standard production metrics. So, things like yield, field workability days, and, VEST scoring, all that sort of thing. But we're also going to be looking at things like soil biology, soil organic matter over time, soil greenhouse gas emissions. And we're also measuring things like water runoff from both sides of the field and at the drain, where the drain side is going into the watercourse, into the ditch, to see, what is the real world impact for things like pesticide runoff, for things like nutrient runoff and soil runoff of having, again, a well-drained field versus we're not even sure how old the drainage is in the other side of the field, but certainly at least 40, maybe 50 years old. And we know across the country, especially with climate change, seeing these bigger pulses of rain coming through, a lot of those historic drainage schemes already at the end of their life are being further wiped out by those big heavy rain events. We're getting to a point where these extremes of weather are basically making it uneconomical to be continuing to produce food in the way we're doing it. Now, that doesn't mean this land has to be taken out of production. We can do other things with it, potentially livestock, agroforestry, these sorts of things. And of course, we know that there's big ambitious targets around the country for habitat creation, for tree planting. And we have to have a national conversation around what we are using our land for and what's the most intelligent thing to use it for. But also, much of our productive agricultural land, let's be honest, again, as the drainage starts to conk out, we're going to get to a space where it is no longer economical to be growing food on that land, and that's why we need to be having this conversation, I believe, about field drainage. And this isn't about going into those last remaining parts of the country, the wetland areas that were never drained and draining them. This is about taking some of our best agricultural land, and it's about making it fit for the future.
That's Joe Stanley from the Allerton Project explaining how effective field drainage is improving productivity and soil health in Leicestershire. Louise, you went along last autumn. You went along again this week. It's going well. It's a really, really important project, isn't it?
Yeah, it is an important project, and there are a couple of good reasons for that, really. When we talk about drainage and when we think about drainage, it has always traditionally been linked to yield and productivity improvements, really. Well, this project, it is doing that, but it is also looking at the soil health and environmental implications and benefits of drainage. So, we all know, don't we, what's happening with the weather at the moment. We are getting this, extreme rainfall, extreme weather, very heavy rainfall. And most farms, if they've got drainage systems on them, they were installed, 40, 50 years ago. Now, they're really at the edge, I think, of what they're capable of. So it's quite important that we understand the impact of this changing weather, really, on soil function and structure, just as much as we understand its impact on the crops that we can grow. So it was interesting to me that there is a real void in what I call environmental data, and things like greenhouse gas emissions from wet soils. That information just doesn't exist at the moment. So this project is going to address all of those things. So it's considering the environment, climate, and biodiversity, as well as crop productivity and performance. We're in a very, very wet spell at the moment, aren't we? And waterlogging has been shown to reduce yields by up to about a quarter. So if those drainage systems just cannot remove the water and get it off the fields, then, we are going to be looking at some problems, aren't we? So I'm very interested to see what results they come up with and where they can go from here. But yeah, putting the environment up there alongside productivity, I think is a really important thing. There's been a lot of good work done on soil health, but we don't actually know enough about what this really heavy rain is doing to that. So looking forward to seeing what they find out.
And as a project, it has wider implications too.
Well, it does do. And of course, one of those implications is that the drainage systems that are on a lot of our farms now are there because there was grant funding available to help with them. It's a hugely expensive operation to have drainage installed. And so some of that cost was borne by government grants. Now, obviously, they don't exist anymore. And I think there's a bigger discussion needed and a better understanding from the whole of the supply chain about the implications of that. Because, of course, on these heavy land farms, and this one is a heavy land farm, when you get huge amounts of rainfall, it really does jeopardize whether you can crop that land or not. And I think they are really hoping that some supply chain partners start to recognise that and then perhaps look at understand how important drainage is if they want to keep this food supply and keep their supply chains going. So that's another aim or ambition, if you like, of the project. And I think that's a really good one as well.
And Hugh, it's the first week of February. The Met Office has just put out its January 2026 rainfall map. It has been wet. It's also been wet in some unusual places.
Hey, the maps are out. Yeah, end of the month. Go and fill your boots on the Met Office website. The percentage, the rainfall average maps show. Some of you may be familiar with them. Those of you aren't, go and have a look. It's really interesting and exciting. If you're a weather anorak like me, percentage of 1991 to 2020 average. That's what they show. And actually, when you look at the one for January, I mean, it's pretty bonkers. So starting in Scotland, you got the whole of northeast Scotland has pretty much had sort of that chunk up to Aberdeen, not right up into the real far north bit, but that northeast corner there, that's had 200% more than its normal average. Yet the west side of Scotland, because of the way the jet stream's been running for this month, it's like below, it's 33% of the average. There's a chunk of Northern Ireland down in Antrim, which is utter washout. The Midlands, the spots, there's a very wet bit around Leicestershire. The south, here, where we are in Surrey, we've got some blimps, West Kent, and then there's this great ruck through Hampshire, down into Wiltshire, into Dorset, just nudging into Devon, Exeter and Honiton, where that is in the 200% above average rainfall. So it's utterly soaked there. Wales, actually, even though I was in Wales this week and it looked quite wet, but when you look at the January data, and actually up around Snowdonia there, it's quite dry. It's been quite dry. And the bizarre one, this is East Anglia, which we know is dry. And actually, when you look at most of East Anglia, that's pretty dry. But hey, here's an irony. Guy Smith, who many of you will know, Essex farmer around Clacton upon Sea, always claims to be the driest farm in the universe, or whatever he claims to be. And where Clacton is, that has got a blue blimp of over 200% rainfall as well. So all of these rainfall sort of protocols, they're really irregular, aren't they? So yeah, knowing what that impact has on the soil, and particularly given that our understanding of soil science and biology and everything is so different now from where it was 40, 50, 60 years ago, when last we got really excited about drainage, and then all we wanted to do is just get the water off the land so that we could get the Massey Ferguson 135 or the Grey Fergie or even the horse and plough into the field to get it ploughed. Now we need to load a whole load more. And the flip side as well is there's the drainage thing, but dare I and it's been mentioned a bit, is the reservoir thing as well. You know, I keep saying to people, look, I'll just keep taking this rain all the time it comes. I know it's miserable and it's horrible and it's grey, but it could stop tomorrow and not rain for another 9 months here on my farm. But in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking we actually really should be doing something about capturing all this water so that we can utilise it further down the line.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from. You can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can message us by texting the word farm followed by a message to 88440. Louise, you've been out and about this week, as we've heard, at the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust in Leicestershire, not just for drainage, but for the launch of the big Farmland Bird Count. This is the bird count where farmers, landowners go outside, count birds, and see how land management is improving bird numbers.
Yeah, that's right. The big Farmland Bird Count kicks off today, runs for the next 2 weeks. One big difference with it this year, and for the first time they're using a digital platform, so it's going to be even easier to get out there and record the birds that you see on the farm. There is now an app that you can download and then either record when you're out in the field or wait until you get back until the warmth and the dry of the farm office. But that, it's Perdix Pro. You can get that. You can use that if that suits you. Otherwise, you can carry on with your paper recording. But really important that this is done. The numbers of people taking part in this every year have been going up. And I know it can be a bit soul-destroying when you then read national newspaper headlines which talk about catastrophic declines in bird numbers and what have you. But there is some great work going on farms that bird numbers are increasing. I mean, if you look at the Allerton project, they've actually increased songbird numbers by 114% in just 8 years. So it can be done. It is being done, and really important that we have evidence to show that. So get out there and get the big Farmland Bird Count done.
If you want to get involved, the 6th to the 22nd of February, do visit the Big Farmland Bird Count website at bfbc.org.uk. Hugh, you've been out and about yourself, Pembrokeshire.
Yeah, Perdix. I've just looked that up, actually. Perdix Pro, Perdix, because I couldn't quite make it out. But I will be doing the Farmland Bird Count. Very important. Yeah, I've been to Pembrokeshire. I went up to Dairy Tech, and there's a lot going on there, despite all of the challenges in the dairy industry. A lot of people turned up, and actually lots of people talking about investment and keeping moving forward despite the challenges there, of which there are many currently, as any dairy farmer will tell you. And then I went down to Pembrokeshire, which I've never really been. Well, I went there about 40 years ago for a friend's wedding when I was a child, but I haven't been there since. So it was quite interesting to go as an adult. And it's lovely, isn't it? It's like sort of slightly flatter version of Cornwall that's more spread out. But yeah, very good. And we looked at the TB project, which is going on, the Welsh Government are running in association with a load of farmers and vets, and really interesting how they are trying to combat TB using lots of really interesting, insightful, intelligent stuff, as opposed to just the usual tools in the box. They're analysing test data, looking at their biosecurity, and looking at their on-farm practices individually per farm as to how that impacts effectively the transmission, the spread of the disease. And I think there's a heck of a lot to learn from what they're doing down there, and some fantastic people, farmers and vets involved. Oh, wonderful people doing a really good job. So that's one to watch. And I hope that can be replicated, not just across Wales. You'd like to think that there's a lot of lessons we can learn to use everywhere else, basically.
Yeah, a big year, of course, in Wales with the Welsh Senedd elections later this year. Elections in Scotland too, and NFU Scotland at its annual conference this week, Louise, launching its 2026 election manifesto, setting out its demands for what it wants from the next Scottish government when it comes to farming and the environment.
Yes, it has set those out. It hasn't asked for multiple things. It's been quite focused on what it's after, and obviously securing funding, long-term funding, is right up at the top there. So, they know what they need. They're asking for the money, and that's just really important. And obviously in Scotland, as the environmental measures become more prominent, that's going to need a bit more money. So there you go. They've set that out, and we'll have to see what sort of response that gets.
Yeah, a full report from the NFU Scotland annual conference by Phil Case in next week's Farmers Weekly. Meanwhile, though, a full report on this week's commodity prices. Hugh, what's happening?
Thank you very much, Johann. Finished their deadweight this week, 638.3. That's back about 6p on the week. The live weight goes up 3p on the week, 363.8. Sheep rings, that's dropped back about 10p this week, 678.7. Although some people also saying some markets starting to move forward again as we got towards the end of this week, thinking about festivals coming up later this month. On to the live weight sheep rings, 344. That's gone up by around 15p on last week's 325.4. Pig price, 190.4. I'm afraid that drops back a penny exactly. That's a continuing and worrying trend for UK pig markets at the moment. Wheat price, 162.5, £162.50. That has dropped 10p on the week. A year ago, you could have got £179.90. That'll depress the heck out of you. Milling wheat, £174.50. That's actually gained £4 on the week. Barley's dropped back a pound or 90p, £151.20. Oilseed rapes gained a pound, 411.60. Feed peas dropped back a pound at 208. Feed beans 202.8. They dropped back £3. And if you are fueling tractors, which many of us are every week, red diesel back all a smidgen, 0.02 of a penny, 67.38. So you can go and dine out if you ordered your diesel this week versus last week on that 0.02 of a penny.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And finally, as well as marking the start of the big Farmland Bird Count, this week is Mind Your Head Week, highlighting the importance of good mental health and well-being. A study by the Farm Safety Foundation has found that 9 out of 10 farmers believe poor mental health is one of the biggest challenges facing the industry today. Long hours working alone can often make farming feel isolating, even when we're part of a wider team. So how can we encourage a feeling of togetherness? Cambridgeshire farmer James Pett.
It's a mix of things, really. I mean, effectively, working in a team is so important, in terms of efficiency and making it enjoyable. And the bigger the team often can be more fun, especially in the mornings, all grouped together, stood there discussing what each one did the previous day, what they're going to do that day. And we sort of go around the room in that form. So it creates a sort of team culture. It can be anything from small things like two-way radio. So when they're working out in the field, the lone working aspect, they can hear what's going on across the other parts. So say the cultivation guys can hear the combine guys, the lorry drivers can hear the combines, etc. So you all feel like you're all part of something bigger. We do smaller events, like barbecues for celebrate the end of harvest. We take people to Agritechnica, the whole farming team, the grain store guys come as well. And we went to Llama this year if they wanted to go, etc. And so we do quite a bit of international trips as well as sort of local trips, which and training, that's the other part that we've found that if we train people as a group, that actually can sort of good for camaraderie and bringing people together. So we did health and safety last week, and we send them all off for the Neuroso spray day, training together, those type of things.
Well, James, not everyone's going to be able to take their entire farm team to Agritechnica, but getting buy-in from everyone, a sense of ownership, is really important for any business, and not just when buying machinery.
I learned a long time ago in my very early career that if people didn't buy into what you were trying to achieve, whether it was even as simple as a different make of tractor, etc., that it would not work. If there was resistance to it, then people would sort of almost go out of their way to make sure that it didn't work. So, taking people on these type of events and then discussing, where do we think we should go? What could we improve on? We can have some amazing conversations sat in the airport, waiting for the plane or on the train, however we get there. And it's those type of conversations, that time out of the day-to-day business, which actually can be more valuable from being in amongst the firefight of the everyday.
That's James Peck there with what he does to encourage team building on the farm. Hugh, I think it was you that suggested we get James on the podcast. Not every farmer, as we said, is going to be able to treat staff to a bit of international travel, but bringing people together and encouraging them to feel part of something bigger is, as James said, so important when it comes to good mental health and well-being.
Yeah, it is. And it's just, I suppose it's making people feel appreciated, isn't it? And they're actually doing something that's really good. And I think he illustrated perfectly. Okay, he's got a big team, like you say. Although that in some cases, while small teams can be challenging, because you may not have the budget or the time to rush off to agri-technical or do wacky things like that. Equally, there's lots of challenges around big teams as well, because you've got to manage those and know that everyone's happy and keep an eye on everyone that's in there. But I think the general ethos of what he's doing, bringing people together, whether that's taking them on a plane to Germany or a train, or getting everyone on the radio at harvest time, really, really important, isn't it? And particularly when you're stuck in in the old days it was 18 hours a day, probably still is for some people. But when you're stuck in cabs for hours on your own, having that contact, and it's probably slightly more connected, although in some ways it has an even more detrimental effect on your mental health with mobile devices now. But certainly having that live two-way radio, for example, that's a really good example, is where everyone feels like they're in the same room, and there's the camaraderie and the general banter and rudeness and jokes and everything else that goes on that keeps everyone rocking on.
Louise, there's a lot of lone working out there in agriculture, not just on the farm, but elsewhere too. You're part of a WhatsApp group of people who've pledged to walk 5K every day, often alone, and then you compare notes on WhatsApp together, even when you're apart, as it were. Are you still doing that?
Well, I have just finished doing that. That was a January challenge. But as a group, we tend to do that more than once a year. We'll probably do it maybe in 3 months of this year, where we just have to make sure that we get out there every day and get some steps done, get a certain distance covered. And it has to be over and on top of what we would normally do. So you have to plan it in and make it work with whatever you've got on that week. It's a good headspace thing that, and everybody, I think there are 20 or 30 of us involved in that. Everybody comments on that. It is really good for their mental well-being and just dealing with stress, I suppose, which is really important. Coming back to what the audio that you did with James Peck, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've got a list in front of me here of the characteristics of a top team, and a sense of ownership and pride is on that list. And you really felt listening to that James is giving that to his employees and to his team. So that's really good news. And of course, as you rightly said, Johann, people do work on their own quite a lot in farming, but they're just going to have to find ways of keeping an open mind, being willing to learn and improve while they're doing that. Not an easy thing to do, but that's what they're going to have to strive for.
And if you are working on your own rather than as part of a wider team, Hugh, it's not that easy, is it?
No, it's not. But I think what is, you've got to take the opportunities, and it's really easy to get into the old doom loop when you're on your own, particularly at the moment with this relentless rain, which we may never see again for another 12 months. So take it while it comes. But with this relentless rain, it's grim, it's dark, it's dismal, it's muddy, and it is a bit of a doom loop sometimes when you are battling constantly, which is what we do for chunks of the year, particularly if we're outside livestock farming, for example. But take opportunities to get off the farm and get out and see other people, because there are plenty of opportunities there. You pay your levies to HDB and they run all these workshops talking about various things, or whether it's within your supply chain and there are opportunities to get off and meet like-minded farmers and talk farming. It's really useful, because if you've been stuck on your own questioning all the stuff that you've been doing, get out there, see some people. And most of all, not only is it good for you, you might actually pick up something that's really useful and will improve your business. And you can look back on and go, my God, that was a really worthwhile afternoon. So get off the farm as much as you can.
Yeah, always good to look beyond the farm gate. And if you want to know more about Mind Your Head Week, 6th to the 13th of February, just Google it or visit yellowwellies.org, the website of the Farm Safety Foundation. That is it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. We do hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. If you have, please do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you've really enjoyed what you've heard, please do leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with all the latest news, views and analysis of all the big stories affecting UK agriculture. But for now, until next week, I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Thank you for listening. This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast was brought to you in partnership with Tesco.